Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful holiday and we're back to making more YouTube videos. So, today we're going to be talking about Donald Trump and his astrology chart. There's been some recent controversy in regards to his name being taken off the ballot in Colorado and Maine. So, this month in January, there's a lot of people speculating that the Supreme Court might even hear this case about, whether he can be taken off the ballot or not in these states. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking a look at Donald Trump's astrology chart to get an idea of at least what he's perceiving and experiencing from his point of view. This may not necessarily give us a total picture on what the Supreme Court will do, but we'll get an idea of the feelings, the emotions, and everything going on within the planetary timeline he's in. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. By the way, I practice Vedic sidereal astrology, so your sign may be different using this method of astrology. My goal is 10,000 subscribers. Thank you all you new subs. Of course, my channel is still growing, so thank you very much. If you're interested in a private reading, check for details down below. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up Donald Trump's chart. And I also have some slides that I'm going to share with you as well. Let's take a look. For those of you, maybe you haven't seen my past readings. Well, Donald Trump's kind of a popular figure to do readings for. So let's take a look. Here's the chart. He's a Leo ascendant. But we're not doing an overall chart reading today. We're going to be looking mainly at the planetary timeline. By the way, quick disclaimer, this astrology reading is for entertainment purposes only, and we're just speculating as to the astrological energies in Donald Trump's chart. So mainly we're going to be focusing on what's going on in the current Vimshatari Dasha timeline he's on. And also we're going to look at a few of the planetary transits to get an idea of what's going on this month, but also for 2024 in sort of a general way. So that's what we're going to talk about now. He's in if we look down here, this is the calculations. He's in a Jupiter K2 period. So what we really want to focus in is on this K2 Antardasha he's in. So this is really the acute energy. So this is like the timeline he's on. K2 is this symbol over here, represented by this upside down looking horseshoe. And always on the opposite end, by the way, is always going to be Rahu. So when we're talking about K2, Rahu is on the opposite pole. They're always 7 houses apart. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, he's in this K2 period from October 2023. So it's pretty recent that he entered this period all the way till September of 2024. So for most of the year, he's going to be in this K2 period. Let's talk about what K2 is. Let me share with you the slideshow really for a moment. So he's in the K2 period again from October 2023 to September 2024. Now, what does K2 represent? Now, we have a word in Vedic astrology. It's a Sanskrit word called a karaka. So karaka just represents, basically, it's what the planet represents. Like if we just look at what does this planet mean, we don't look at the house, we don't look at anything. For example, Venus would be the karaka of marriage and romance. So what is K2 the karaka of? So K2 represents things like wandering, scattering, hopeless causes, apathy, not interested, separation, past lives, dispersed energies. And K2 often represents the things that we have to let go of within the current lifetime to grow. Okay. So this is kind of interesting. So we know he's in a period of what would normally be losses for most people. Okay. Now there are always exceptions to the rule. There's always an occasion where maybe K2 produces a fruit, but in most of the cases I've seen, like 90% of the charts, K2 is usually associated with some sort of losses. The feeling with K2 is always being at the mercy of forces outside yourself. So I'm feeling like from Donald Trump's point of view, he's trying to run this campaign. He's trying to get on the ballot. There's all these lawsuits happening. There's now these states that have him off the ballot. So it's almost like he's contending with like these numerous outside forces that are like basically from his point of view arrayed against him, right? But K2 can be a time where it's a very difficult time emotionally. You feel like you're just not in control of anything. So that's the big takeaway with this K2 period. It's typically not a time that I make predictions for people. Typically I don't say K2 is going to be a time that you're going to be tremendously successful. It usually is not the case. Let's also further break this down. You'll notice in the astrology chart, it's in the fourth house. So we're going to talk about that. It's in the fourth house of Scorpio there, and it's with the moon. It has a lot of the same meaning there, the fourth house and the moon, and how they can represent the homeland. Okay. One thing I do want to point out is, and we'll talk about this in a moment, K2 and moon are in the 10th house of the Navamsa chart. And then um, K2 in the first house of the moon chart, which is kind of interesting to think about. But in the Navamsa chart, it's showing us the motivation, the psycho-emotional motivation there. There's definitely this motivation to be in the 10th house. The 10th house represents public leadership and so forth. But K2, is it an illusion? That's the question we got to ask ourselves. Is this all an illusion? Because during K2 periods, you can be chasing oftentimes a fantasy or like a phantom of sorts. Now, K2 in the fourth house with a debilitated moon. The moon's debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. Now, fourth house typically represents our homeland, our place of birth, where we're from, our country, our home. It could actually literally represent our home and mother figures. Okay. So K2 represents disconnection from those kind of things. K2, the planet of disconnection, and aptly shows that matters of homeland will be frustrating. So, from Donald Trump's point of view, the homeland might not seem so friendly right now. I mean, there's these court cases that are happening right now. Now, there's a couple of states that are, essentially disputing whether he should be on the ballot or not. And so, from his point of view, that there seems to be a lack of support from people from the homeland, even though I know there are plenty of supporters out there. But from the point of view, this feels like it's feeling like an uphill battle. Okay, it's feeling like wow, it's nothing like 2016. 2016, there wasn't all these mechanisms and all these forces. And that's the thing about being in a K2 period. It's just you feel like it's totally outside your control. A lot of times during a K2 period, a person will feel like they're just witnessing all these events and things that are happening to them, and they're not really in control of it. It's a difficult period to run a campaign, especially when I'm thinking about K2 being with moon. There's kind of like this scattered sense of self, this scattered sense of just being connected to everyone. It would be a really difficult, in my opinion, to run a campaign during this period. Now let's talk about some considerations. So when Donald Trump won the presidency back in 2016 November, he was in a Rahu period, which is the opposite pole of K2. So we already know that Rahu was able to project him into the presidency, but we're talking about the opposite pole, K2. A lot of times, what I've noticed is during a K2 period, people will want what's where Rahu is. People will want that. It's like you can see where Rahu is, but Rahu can't see where K2 is. There's this disconnection. So a lot of times you're still trying to chase where Rahu is, but remember, K2 represents the fluttering tail. It can't get it where Rahu is. So that's the thing. So a lot of times there's this sense of hopelessness during K2 periods. Like you can't get there. So, for example, he might be trying to reclaim this idea of what happened in November of 2016, but it just feels like it's out of reach. It feels like there's this frustration that's happening. So, I feel like the more one fights during this period, the more frustration will be encountered during the K2 period. Now, it has been said that Rahu periods tend to feel like Saturn in that there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anxiety during Rahu periods, but Rahu can take you to new levels of success. Whereas K2 feels like Mars. So there can be this feeling of anger, this feeling of aggression, this feeling of trying to reach your goals with this vigor, but not being able to achieve those goals. So definitely from the chart, what we can see is that there's whether or not the Supreme Court rules that this is if it sustains what Colorado or Maine is doing, or whether or not says they need to keep them on the ballot. I feel like there's going to be the feeling of there's just always these new obstacles that are appearing in the path, so it could be quite difficult. I don't personally see how there's honestly going to be a campaign run during this period. And along with some other psychics and astrologers, I'm actually thinking that there might even be some problems closer to when the election happens towards the end of 2024. So there might even be some issues with the election itself. There might be a lot of issues happening around that time that are very unpredictable, because K2 represents like something slipping out of your grasp. That's something to think about during this time. So, anyways, being in the K2 period, it does seem like a very difficult time for Donald Trump. Let me know what you all think down below. What do you think how is this gonna turn out for Donald Trump? Let me know what you think. Also, I'm open to suggestions for astrology charts. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.